Nazism in the United States is nothing new. In fact, it was born in the 1930s with the German American Bund, which grew to disturbing levels. Its originator, World War I veteran Fritz Kuhn, a German who moved to the United States in the 1930s and became a naturalized citizen, held a master's degree in chemical engineering. Their pro-Nazi agenda supported U.S. isolationism, avoidance of European conflicts for Germany's benefit. They were also anti-black, anti-non-white immigrant, and naturally anti-Jewish. After Kuhn went to prison on tax evasion charges, the organization, which used to fill Madison Square Garden with giant portraits of not Adolf Hitler, but rather George Washington and other venues, had tens of thousands of followers, but they melted away. But after World War II, the American Nazi movement was resurrected by a World War II veteran who was perhaps even more radically bent than Kuhn, and who idolized Adolf Hitler. Who was George Lincoln Rockwell? What stimulated his interest in fascism? How effective was he? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, former history professor, Army and Marine Corps veteran, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. George Lincoln Rockwell was born in Bloomington, Illinois on March 9, 1918, and was the oldest of three children of George Lovejoy Rockwell and Claire Rockwell. His parents were traveling vaudeville comedians and actors, and they divorced when Rockwell was 6 years old. So he spent his youth divided between his mother in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and his father in Boothbay Harbor, Maine. Rockwell attended Atlantic City High School in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and applied to Harvard University when he was 17 years old, but he was denied admission. Instead, his father enrolled him at the Hebron Academy in Hebron, Maine. Rockwell then enrolled at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island in 1938 as a philosophy major, where he met his future wife, Judith Altman, who was a student at Pembroke College. In 1940, he dropped out and accepted a commission in the United States Navy. Rockwell attended naval flight schools in Massachusetts and Florida and served in both the Battle of the Atlantic and the Pacific War in World War II. He served aboard the USS Omaha, USS Pastorius, USS Wasp, and USS Mobile as a support, photo reconnaissance, transport, and training pilot. On April 24, 1943, Rockwell married Judith and they had three daughters, Bonnie, Nancy, and Phoebe Jean. Rockwell and his in-laws had issues, as Judith was not raised to be the docile and compliant wife as Rockwell expected. The marriage was marred with violent arguments, and on at least one occasion, Rockwell did strike his wife. After the war, Rockwell remained in the Naval Reserve, but worked as a sign painter out of a small shop that his father owned in Boothbay Harbor. Later, he entered the commercial art program at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York in 1946, so he and Judith moved there. Rockwell won the $1,000 first prize for his advertisement for the American Cancer Society, but he left Pratt before completing his last year, and he and Judith moved to Maine to start his own advertising agency. Rockwell, still in the reserves, was called back to duty as lieutenant commander at the beginning of the Korean War in June 1950. The family relocated to San Diego, where he trained Navy and Marine Corps pilots in both basic and advanced flight schools specializing in instrument training. It was during this time that Rockwell began reading old German propaganda, including Mein Kampf and the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, and he was enamored. His devotion was increased due to the rantings of Senator Joseph McCarthy's openly hostile stance against communism, the anti-Semitism of carmaker Henry Ford, and famed aviator Charles Lindbergh's stance on race and avoidance of the USA having become involved in foreign conflicts, especially during World War II. Rockwell was stationed in Iceland on an unaccompanied tour as a Grumman F-8F Bearcat pilot and promoted to commander in 1952. Judith and the children remained behind with her mother in Barrington, Rhode Island, where Judith filed for divorce in 1953. Rockwell attended a diplomatic party in Reykjavik where he met Margaret Pora Hallgrímsson, the niece of Iceland's ambassador to the United States, and they married on October 3, 1953, by Pora's uncle, the Bishop of Iceland. They spent their honeymoon in Berchtesgaden, Germany, the location of Hitler's Berghof in the Bavarian Alps. The couple had 3 children, Hallgrímur, Margaret, and Evelyn Bentina. In September 1955, in Washington, D.C., he launched U.S. Lady, a magazine for United States servicemen's wives. The magazine incorporated Rockwell's political causes, his opposition to both racial integration and communism. The publication had financial problems, so he had then sold the magazine. However, he still aspired to pursue a career in publishing and was good at marketing. As Rockwell stated, quote, "When I was in the advertising game, we used to use nude women. Now I use the swastika and stormtroopers. You use what brings them in." End quote. Margaret's father was appalled by all of this and arrived in the U.S. in 1957 to bring her back to Iceland after he discovered that Rockwell was one of the most active racists in the United States. Margaret divorced Rockwell soon afterward, and she remarried in 1963. Rockwell returned to Washington, D.C. in 1955. He gradually became even more radicalized until, according to his biographer, Rockwell was on the farthest fringe of the right wing. In 1957 to 1958, Rockwell stated that he had dreams of himself meeting Hitler. Rockwell found support through Harold Noel Arrowsmith Jr., a wealthy heir and anti-Semite, who provided Rockwell with a house and printing equipment in 1958, and together they formed the National Committee to Free America from Jewish Domination. Rockwell's first demonstration was on July 29, 1958, in front of the White House, protesting President Dwight D. Eisenhower's decision to send peacekeeping troops to Lebanon during that country's brief civil war in 1958, which was called Operation Bluebat. Rockwell and his supporters were already on the federal radar, especially when they specifically protested what they called Jewish control of the government. After the Hebrew Benevolent Congregation temple bombing in October 1958, the police raided Rockwell's home. There was never any evidence that Rockwell's people were responsible, but he was under suspicion. Journalist Drew Pearson was mainly responsible for bringing Rockwell to the forefront after writing an article describing how Rockwell and his followers, dressed in uniforms, armed themselves with guns, and paraded at his home in Arlington, Virginia. In March 1959, Rockwell founded the World Union of Free Enterprise National Socialists, later renamed the American Nazi Party, and then even later renamed again as the National Socialist White People's Party, headquartered at his home at 928 North Randolph Street in Arlington, Virginia. Rockwell, always creative, published his Animal Farm parody, a poem, and the children's book, The Fable of the Ducks and the Hens, in 1959. On July 4, 1960, again on the National Mall, Rockwell and his men were confronted by a mob and a riot ensued. The police arrested Rockwell and 8 party members. Rockwell demanded a trial, and instead he was committed to a psychiatric hospital for 30 days. He was released 12 days later and found mentally competent to stand trial, but nothing came of it. He then published a pamphlet titled How to Get Out or Stay Out of the Insane Asylum as a guide to those who may find themselves in a similar situation. As a result of his political activities, the Navy discharged Rockwell 1 year short of retirement, stating he was not deployable due to his political views. Rockwell later blamed the Jews for his being terminated. On January 15, 1961, Rockwell and his associates picketed the local premiere of the film Exodus at the Saxon Theater in downtown Boston. After Boston Mayor John F. Collins declined to deny Rockwell's group a permit, Members of the local Jewish community organized a counter-demonstration of 2,000 protesters in response on the corner of Tremont and Boylston Streets. This action forced the police to converge on the theater and forced Rockwell into a police cruiser that took him to Logan International Airport, where Rockwell was then boarded onto a flight to Washington, D.C. In 1962, Rockwell planned a major rally to celebrate Hitler's birthday on April 20th, and he joined British neo-Nazi Colin Jordan in Gloucestershire, England, where they organized the World Union of National Socialists. In September, Rockwell awarded one of his members a medal for punching Martin Luther King Jr. in the face. This was when King was in Birmingham, Alabama on September 28, 1962, speaking to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, attended by 300 people. He was attacked by 22-year-old Roy James, who was sitting in the 6th row. James rushed forward and hit King in the jaw and then again in the neck. Rockwell approved of the attack. During the 1964 United States presidential election, Rockwell was a write-in candidate, receiving 212 votes. He then ran as an independent in the 1965 Virginia gubernatorial election, receiving 5,730 votes, or 1.20% of the vote, finishing last among the four candidates. Rockwell then returned to organizing protests on the National Mall in Washington and at other sites, espousing his twisted beliefs and hatred across the country. This was also when he started his publication, the National Socialist Bulletin, later renamed the Stormtrooper magazine, in honor of the German publisher Julius Streicher, who had published Der Stürmer, which was the official anti-Jewish and anti-communist Nazi Party publication under Adolf Hitler. The American Nazi Party wore the uniforms and marched with Nazi flags down American streets. But Rockwell was also flexible. He assisted the Ku Klux Klan in organizing civil rights protesters, one more reason the feds took an interest in him. Ironically, Rockwell was a very outspoken Holocaust denier, and he once told a reporter, "I don't believe for 1 minute that any 6 million Jews were exterminated by Hitler. It didn't happen." Rockwell also called Adolf Hitler the white savior of the 20th century and believed that Martin Luther King Jr. was a tool for Jewish communists desiring to rule the white community. He blamed the civil rights movement on Jews and viewed most of them as traitors. When the Freedom Riders became active in the civil rights movement, Rockwell then created his Hate Bus, a Volkswagen minibus decorated with racist slogans and imagery that he drove around the country to rallies. This was when the BBC referred to Rockwell as the American Hitler. Rockwell advocated for the deportation of all blacks to Africa, such as to Liberia, and funded by the U.S. government. He also believed in racial segregation and white separatism, and he agreed with Elijah Muhammad and the early Malcolm X of the Nation of Islam, both men preaching the same thing. Rockwell spanned the nation, speaking at rallies and universities, leading demonstrations, and debating notable black activists, such as Black Panther founder Stokely Carmichael. Rockwell also coined the term white power in 1966 as a response to the Black Power movement. In the summer of 1966, Rockwell led a counter-demonstration against Martin Luther King, fighting segregation in the white Chicago suburb of Cicero, Illinois, believing King was a tool for Jewish communists who wanted to integrate America. In November of 1966, the American Civil Liberties Union once again represented Rockwell, defending his right to stage marches or parades in Jewish neighborhoods during Jewish holidays. Rockwell believed that integration was a Jewish plot to rule the white community, and soon came to believe that the Klan was stuck in the past and ineffective in helping him wage a modern racial struggle. Rockwell aligned his group with other neo-Nazi groups around the world as part of the World Union of National Socialists. On August 25, 1967, the 49-year-old George Rockwell was shot and killed in Arlington, Virginia by former Nazi Party member John Patler. Patler was the editor and cartoonist for the Stormtrooper magazine, whom Rockwell kicked out of the party for alleged Bolshevik leanings. Patler had changed his name from John Patsalos as a homage to Adolf Hitler. Rockwell was at the Dominion Hills shopping center while trying to do his laundry. As he went to his car to get bleach, Patler fired from the rooftop of the shopping center. Patler was arrested half an hour later after throwing his gun into a 4-mile run nearby, when he was spotted with wet trousers waiting for a bus by a police officer. Hearing of his son's death, Rockwell's 78-year-old father said, "I am not surprised at all. I've expected it for quite some time." The Commonwealth's attorney pushed for Patler to receive the death penalty, but he only received a 20-year prison sentence, and he was released on parole after just 8 years. Patler then violated his parole and received an additional 6 years in jail. Upon Rockwell's death, he was succeeded by his second-in-command, Matthias Kuhl, who led the organization until his death in 2014 and had renamed the group the New Order in 1983. Kuhl relocated its national headquarters to Wisconsin. Another former associate, William Luther Pierce, founded the National Alliance, and he also wrote the racist dystopian novel The Turner Diaries, which became a Bible for future generations of would-be domestic terrorists. Many additional neo-Nazi groups were formed over the years, such as the Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Nations, since Rockwell's death. Some of them were formed by his followers, and other groups were formed by newer generations of white supremacists. Most of these groups have simply died off and become irrelevant. It is quite ironic that during Rockwell's long tenure as head of the American Nazi Party, that his group never really became involved in overt violence, although they preached it, but they were suspected of a couple of bombings, arsons, and robberies. However, nothing was ever proven. Thank you for watching this episode of Forgotten History. If you liked what you saw, please click like, share, and subscribe. And if you would like to assist with the ever-increasing cost of production, please consider becoming a channel member and joining our Patreon page. Please check out our merchandise store. And thanks for watching.